Hello again, welcome back to part 3B of our Scratch lesson series. So first thing that we need to do is get back into the online version of Scratch. Make sure that you're logged in. I'm going to go into Create, and then I'm going to go up to the folder here where Save Projects are. And at the end of the last lesson we left this one as Crabber 2. What I want to do is click this button here that says See Inside, because that's the one that takes us to our programs. So when we finished last time, we just done these 4 programs here. Let's just test those. So the idea of those were that they stop our character from going off the side of the screen, and it just brings it back in again if that happens at any time. So we know those are working. So what we're going to do now is start bringing in some enemies which are going to go across any of these. Just for the time being, I'm going to leave these X and Y positions because they may be useful to us when we bring our enemy sprites on. Probably after we've got the first one, we won't need them anymore. So start off down here, go on to choose a sprite. Now, in the original Frogger game, it was cars and such going across the roads. This version of Scratch doesn't seem to have them, so we're going to go a little bit different with this. I'm going to go into the animals, and what we're looking for on the sprites, there's different animated ones. So something like that would be okay because it tends to stay roughly the same height as we do it. What we don't want among some of them are where it kind of moves up and down and such, like with any of these, or where it sort of turns. We can fix it on some of them we can't. So what I'm going to do for our first enemy, I'm going to pick the most dangerous creature known to humankind, which is the grey rabbit. So we're going to bring that one in. Here's our sprite here. Now, if you notice on that last one, it kind of jumps up partway through the animation, so we're not going to use all of that. Make sure that we're definitely on that sprite. Go to costumes, and here's the different costumes that we've got. So the first one's okay. Second one is the legs moving. Then it starts standing up. So I'm going to remove that one and the other 3 so that we're just left with that sort of basic animation there now. And then we're going to click onto the code. First thing that we need to do then is get our enemy sprite fitting into there. So it's just the same as we did at the start with the crab. We're just going to take a guess. So we say 40 and see if it'll fit in one of these. It's not going to do, but it's just poking slightly out. Let's try 35. No. Yeah, so 30 seems to be okay, and I'm going to move it over to this side here. Then I'm going to have a look at these numbers and see where we're close to. So I'm going to see if we can get away there with minus 110. No, that's not going to do it. You see how it's just poking out the top there. So, and I've just made it even worse, haven't I? Minus 115. Yeah, that'll be okay. And this one then, closest to that is going to be minus 220. So we're okay there. That's the position we want our sprite to start off at each time. So I'm going to go to events. When the flag's clicked, let's go to motion, and we want this one to go to those coordinates which are there, which is why they're appearing to begin with. We're also, just to make certain, let's tell it to point to the right, which is that's already set out on each of those. Now we need it moving across the screen. So again, let's go back to events, and when the flag is clicked, we want it to keep moving forever. And then back on motion, we've got our move 10 steps. We don't want this to be 10 steps because at some point I want us to be able to have our character just in front of this and be able to move and not catch up with it and not get caught up or anything there. So if we go back to our crab sprite for the player character one, what we need to look at on here is the left and right movements, and we were telling our crab to move 20 steps at a time. That's what we're going to use for this one. So we're going to tell it to move 20 steps, and then we are also going to wait 1 second between each movement. So if we run that now, so we should be getting very slow and sort of movement going across there. I'm just waiting here because I want it to get to the very end where it gets to the edge of the screen. So we're almost there. Now the way that we've done that, it's now that sprite is stuck on the side of the screen, which isn't very good for the game. When we've done similar things to this before, like the bubble popping game, you use an if on edge bounce, but I don't want that this time. We want the enemies to keep going in the same direction. So what we're going to do with that now, we're going to go back to our crab, and we've got this one here, look, which is forever if the X position is greater than 200. So I get hold of the top of that, pull it down to here, and put it on top of the rabbit sprite. You can see it sort of wiggles there, look, every time I do it, and let go. Then make sure you go back to that rabbit sprite, and now we've got this one in here. So for our rabbit, we're going to say if the X position is greater than 220. We're not going to set it to 200, we're going to set it to minus 220. Minus 220 is what we started at before, and that's why I've picked 220 for the far one. So let's just go again with that, and what we should find this time is that when that reaches the far end, it brings it back over here, so that we just get that continuous animation going back and forth all the time. So again, just waiting until that gets up to the far end. Okay, so that one now is moving along there at each stage. I think it'd be a good idea to pause the video, go bring in the rabbit sprite, and get these 3 programs before you go onto the next section. Once you've got all your programs done, and we've got our enemy moving across, another program that we're going to add now is to put some animation onto that sprite. So again, we're going to go into events. When the flag is clicked, we're going to go into control, we're going to use a forever loop, then we're going to go into the looks, and we're going to try to do next costume, into control. At the moment we're going to use wait 1 second. We might change this depending on how the animation looks. So now that's okay, because we've got that 1 second there, 1 second there, and we're getting some sort of animation with this one. Whilst we're here, we're going to take that program and we're going to put it on the crab, so it duplicates it, and then we're in here. So we have the same thing roughly with the crab there. So if we now run this again, then we've got that little bit of animation there, and we've got our animation on this one. So let's stop that from running. We'll try rabbit. Because we've built a few programs, I think this is not a bad place to change our name and save, because now we're going to start getting a few more of the enemies onto there. So right click and duplicate, so that we've got rabbit 2. I want to go back to rabbit 1 and I want to move it back into its original place. So like we did earlier in the last video, I'm going to double click on that one, and that will put it into position. Yeah, our rabbit 2 is up there. Now we don't want it in exactly the same position, but we do need something of a gap in between them. And again, it's not that important what we do, we just need to have enough of a gap that we can maybe fit our crab sort of in between a couple of them there. So I'm going to go to rabbit 2. So let's start off with a guess. Let's say minus 100. I'm going to double click this, and that'll bring the rabbit there. So minus 100 is too far to the left. Say minus 40. No, I didn't really want to run that off, but I think actually that would get us about the right sort of area. So we go on to our first one, and double click the positioning program. Second one, double click the positioning program, and we can see, yeah, that's okay. So that's going to continue in the same way. So we're going to add another sprite. So if we duplicate Rabbit 3, and we want it really about the same spacing, so we're going to be somewhere around here. The easiest way to get that accurate, it's not that important, but minus 220 the first one, next one is at minus 40, so that's a difference of 180. So we want this one at plus 140. So if we double click on that position, it gets us an even spacing on any of those. Now we just want to try that out, and hopefully our rabbits will start coming down. They will bunch up a little bit on this end, but it will even out once all of them have kind of gone through. Yeah, so we're starting to get that spacing again, and we'll be back where we started from. So it just adds, not exactly randomness, but it means that things aren't always the same, which makes it a little bit more difficult for the player at each stage. So again, there would be a good place to pause it and add in your two other enemy sprites there. Our next step here then is to now start getting some of our enemies on the other lines. We're going to do this slightly differently than when we brought this first sprite in, because it just saves us some time with the programs. So we're going to take the first sprite, rabbit, and we're going to duplicate that one. Then I'm going to go up to costumes, and then I'm going to bring the new sprite costume in here rather than bringing in a full sprite over there in the sprite tray. So we'll click on the magnifying glass. Let's go back to animals, and if you notice, all of these, their different costumes are spread out now because these are not sprites, these are individual costumes. So with that one, I'm going to bring in the hedgehog. Then I'm going to do the same again, but I'm going to go then for hedgehog B, and the same again. Go back to animals, and hedgehog C. I'm not going to use D and E because we can see how they're turning around there. Once we've got those three in, we're going to go up to the rabbit costumes, and we're going to switch those off. Let's go back to the code. First thing that we need to do with this is rename it. I'm going to get rid of these two here. So if we go back to the crab, go into motion, and we can just untick those. So back to our hedgehog. So let's just have a look at the sizing of this. It's probably could be quite a bit bigger there. So let's try 50 to start with. That's filling most of this area. That's pretty good. So let's just move it up a fraction, and then we're trying to look for some sort of round numbers here. So minus 25. With this one, we're going to do the same as we did with the rabbit. We're going to start it at minus 220. So it's slightly off the screen, but that's okay. So now those numbers need putting in here. So the minus 220 is okay. This one is minus 25. Let's put it in as plus minus 25, so that we've got those each time. So if we just move this out of the way, and let's just run with that, and it's going this way. It doesn't make the game overly difficult though when that is lining up exactly with our first enemy. So with this one, we're going to change the amount of time it takes to move. Let's go for 0.3 seconds and just see how that makes a difference. Yeah, so we've got this one moving quite a bit faster. And now it's a case of just repeating what we did with the rabbit sprites. We can do that by right-clicking on our hedgehog, clicking duplicate, so we've got a new one here. going to go back to the first one and double click on our program that positions it, then onto this one, and we just find our position in here. I'm going to go around the middle, so we might just go for 0 on this one. So we're going to tell this one to go to 0 on the x-axis, still minus 25 because we want to be in this exact lane, and we don't really need to change anything else there. So as they're moving along, at this point I'm going to change our file name to Crabber4. Our save hasn't come up there, so I'm just going to move something. As soon as we make a bigger change, then it gives us the option to save, so that's what I'm going to do. The 2 videos that we've done so far are coming to about 30 minutes, so at that point we're going to stop, and we'll continue with the rest of this next week. If anybody does want to do a little bit more on this, I would say then in the next lane up there, just do what we've done with these, bring in another sprite. Maybe on that one you would have 4 of them, space those out, so you can add anything in, but we will continue with that next week. So speak to you then.